So I think we were all very moved by the last panel, and I think we have another wonderful panel ahead. They're all in place. One of our panelists is, unfortunately could not get a visa to come and be with us. She was supposed to, so she will be online. And I pass on, please don't forget to, if you have questions, to post them. And I pass it on to Masego.
Good afternoon. Or should I rather greet you in my mother tongue, Dumelang. Dumelang means hello, it means good afternoon, but it also means we agree. Because where I come from, dialogue is very important. And we use dialogue as a space in which we find convergence, points of agreement, shared visions and shared dreams. And I was listening to my name is Masego Matswamuse. I work for the Oak Foundation as the director of the Environment Program. But I also come from a background of having worked very closely with climate justice movements and economic justice networks that connect and work with grassroots organizations. And we often speak of them as locally rooted, but globally relevant. So it gives me great pleasure to be facilitating this panel discussion. I was listening to the conversation in the earlier panel session, and we were reminded of a number of things. We were reminded that the risk of climate change and climate overshoot is with us already. Somebody reminded us about the heat waves, the floods, the droughts that we're faced with, and that we have indeed reached the limit of curbing, exceeding the global warming temperature by 1.5 degrees. And the impacts of climate change are worsening. They're worsening all over the world. There is not a corner of the world that is not touched. But at the same time, we know very well that the capacities to adapt and the capacities to mitigate the impacts of climate change are not equally shared. But what we did this afternoon was to begin to share stories of inspiration about the innovation and the change and the solutions that are being driven by people who are supporting those who are most affected. This afternoon, we get to turn that story and draw inspiration from the solutions that are being driven by the people themselves in the communities that they work with, in the places that they work, that they are based, and on behalf of the communities that they come from themselves. Not as victims, but as solution providers. I am so excited for that. Shall we give them a round of applause? Before we even meet them, that is, in anticipation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves to you. Because I think the stories that they have hold more power than I can possibly tell you in a few words. And what I've asked them to do is, I did say to them, I'm going to invite you to please share with us what is the passion and the purpose that gets you excited to do what you do. As you tell us who you are, where you're from, what you're working on, just bring us in a little bit into your personal story. What is it that drives your purpose and gets you excited about the work that you do? I'll start with Omagano.
Thank you, Masego, for that great introduction. And I'm very happy to be here, and I'm feeling incredibly inspired by the speakers before us starting in the morning. So I'm feeling very privileged to be here. I am Omagano Shoya. I am Namibian, and if you know Namibia, it's a very semi-arid country. I'm from the people called Awambo. That's my tribe. And when we greet each other, one of the things we say is ovula, and that means and the rain. And that tells you how important rain is to us. Drought is nothing that I'm unfamiliar with. I grew up spending half of my time in the city and half of my time in the village. And I saw firsthand the impacts of drought. And I know now that it's getting worse, and we're seeing that getting worse. So I grew up not really distinguishing people from nature. It was just part of what we do. It's part of our everyday lives. And I was fortunate enough to enter the community-based conservation space where there's no distinction between people. In fact, people are centered in conservation. And it's now called community-led conservation, which is incredible and a signal of how important people and nature are. And I joined Maliasili because of the recognition that local people, indigenous communities, are working on the biodiversity and climate crisis. They're doing the work. And at Maliasili, we are supporting, we're partnering, and we're advocating for the local people, for the local organizations that are doing the work, and making sure that their voices are amplified, making sure that they are in the rooms that they're supposed to be in, making sure that they're seen, essentially. And that makes me very happy, and it drives the passion, because I can't not work in this field, because it's my everyday life. It's my reality. So for me, it's very personal. And that is why I show up every day, and that's what I'm doing with my freedom in answering that question that was asked previously.
Thank you, Omagano. Omvula. And in my language, the other greeting is to say bula. And when we say bula, it also means, as you know, rain. And the response is aine. Aine is let it rain. Because we do value nature. And on a daily basis, remind ourselves of our connection and our relationship with nature. Hash, what is the passion that brings you to this job?
Thank you, Mexico. And it's really inspiring to hear from you. I am a CEO of an organization called Bindi International. So we particularly focus on providing vocational skilling to women from rural and semi-urban areas so that they can repair, maintain, fabricate solar systems, not just for lighting, but also for livelihood supporting work as well. Apart from that, we work with them on creating awareness around financial literacy and awareness. And what actually got me to do this was that as I come from India, and as you all must be seeing right now, there is a lot of India rising and a lot of things happening there. But India also is the country which has the biggest inequality right now. And when you see all of these corporates with Google, Microsoft, all of them headed by India, but the reality in India is that the equality is so big that it's just bizarre. So when I got this, I did my engineering basically, and then I did MBA, and I was going to go the same path that half of the Indians who do engineering and MBA do, go and sit for Google, Microsoft, and just be there in New York or wherever, Seattle. But that is when I got this opportunity to work for an amazing organization which was called Barefoot College at that point of time. And when I went over there, I didn't have a clear idea on what I wanted to work on, but I started by translating documents for people so that they could get their ration, they could get their identification number, and all of these things. And then that actually made me feel that just because I have that exposure, that I am able to contribute so much in this. It's not their fault. It's because I have that right exposure. And then I met some of the solar engineers that were there, and me being 4 years doing electrical engineering, and I didn't know anything about engineering and electrical. But those women, in 6 months, were able to teach me much more than what my college taught me. So that actually inspired me, and that actually made me think that I know the right words that float around in the outside world. They know the real stuff. So I could just act as a catalyst or just throw those PPP model jargons that are all there that float. So I thought that's where I would function very well, and I had a great, inspiring team over there to help me out. Yeah.
Thank you, Harsh, and thank you for reminding us. You see, I got too excited about the idea of decentralizing and also democratizing knowledge production and really turning the head on what we understand as sites of knowledge. And from what you were sharing, what you learn in the engineering classes, you got to learn more powerfully from the women that you worked with, and we hope to dig more into that later. I'm going to turn to Mams, who unfortunately couldn't join us in person, but thanks to technology, she's able to join us online. Mams, would you care to introduce yourself and also speak to your passion and how it lands you in the work that you do?
Thank you, Masego, and it really feels good to be here. It actually feels good to belong to an audience of like-minded people. So I really feel privileged to be in this room. So what drives me? So I always say I'm driven by any solution that is aimed at driving social justice. And let me just give you context regarding this. So I was born into privilege, and that was in Soweto. And you go to school, you've got your lunchbox, and then other learners, other peoples at that time, they don't have lunchbox. They don't have food for lunch, and it's sort of I could, that kind of experience would leave me unsettled, even though I was a very young girl. So growing up, I then realized that we're living in a world of inequality, and I just thought to myself, I want to be counted in as one of the women who have shaped, or rather who have transitioned inequality to social justice and therefore climate justice. So I farm. I grow lucerne on my farm in Brits in South Africa. And so lucerne is actually livestock feed. So when it's ready to be harvested, it makes flowers, it blooms, it makes beautiful purple flowers. So someday, a while back, and this is now 2019, I was actually seated on my stoop at the farm. And before I knew it, I had uninvited guests in the form of bees. And I was just appreciating them, the scenery that they provided. But the bees wouldn't go. They wouldn't go anywhere for days on end. And I was like, this is bizarre. What could be happening here? So I decided to go back to my elders, to go back to my ancestral home in Rustenburg. And I sat my elders down and I shared with them what I had experienced on the farm regarding the bees. And one of my aunts said to me, the bees symbolizes 3 things. And I remember that conversation vividly. She said they symbolize wisdom, they symbolize wealth, and they also symbolize wellness, And we had this long conversation, and at the end of the conversation, I then understood the significance of bees within the African spirituality. And I made it my business to venture into the beekeeping space, and hence Be African, was birthed in 2020. And and I realized that one of my realizations with Be African and the bee business, is that it's the most affordable ventures I ever got myself into. And therefore, as I began to collect and gather information about the bees, the role of the bees in the food chain, the role of the bees in the ecosystem, I then thought to myself, ma'ams, you are going to drive the inclusion of rural women and youth in the beekeeping sector. And how I go about doing this is basically by leveraging forest resource and creating sustainable beekeeping project for these rurals.
Thank
So
you.
in short, that's what really drives me. So I look at the bees, I watch the bees every morning when I wake up, darting from one flower to the next. And I appreciate the energy. And it's that appreciation of the African honeybee's energy that rubs off me, and hence the drive to continue doing the work that I'm doing.
Thank you, ma'ams. I think by the end of the session, we will all be Bee Africa. Rose, I'd like to turn to you. You have a really amazing story on how you learned to being an African woman farmer and a lot more. Okay. I'd love for you to share with the audience what your passion is and how it lends you to this work.
Okay. I'd like to first start by saying thank you to the amazing energy and the conversations and the insights that I've gotten from this conference. I kid you not, if you open my brain right now, my neurons are firing at full capacity. So thank you very much. So who am I? Before, when we were having a chat with Masego, and she brought out an interesting insight in that she said, I break the mold. And I think that is one of the takeouts I'd like everybody to come out with here, that we women farmers are not always the helpless victims that are portrayed in the media. I am here. I mean, I don't look like a typical woman farmer, but I'm a farmer, and I'm here in my capacity as a farmer. And I'd like you to take out and see who a woman farmer can be and who a woman farmer is. We have incredible resilience. We are powerful, and we are able to design and effect solutions by ourselves with a lot of, with a little information and resources. So how do I break the mold, according to Masego? As much as I'm a farmer, I've been a farmer for over 20 years. I'm also a mental health practitioner. I'm a psychologist. I also do community mental health work. I'm also a researcher. Where is Mo? I was very happy to hear she's a Koli because I'm a Koli. I'm also an artist, hence the flamboyant, loud prints and jewelry. So I'm actually a trained fine artist. I'm also on the board of SHM. I don't know whether any of you work with SHM in the UK. I also have I founded a CBO called Nawiri Pamoja, and that's where I do a lot of the community work that I do. I'm also in 5 small women groups, which are very significant to the story that I'm going to tell. So a lot of you, when I introduce myself, ask me, so how do you find time for it all? How do you do it all? And I'm telling you, I'm a woman. That's my superpower. So the second part of the question was why, what drives me? And I'll give a little story. Before COVID, I think I had the perception that, I'm educated, I know it all, and when I went to the community, as much as I know from my trainings on retirement planning and when I train people on those, that you're supposed to go in and listen and, integrate before you start giving all these solutions. And still, that perception and tendency to talk at and give solutions that are from outside was still there. So during COVID, something interesting happened. Everything closed down. And what does that mean for consultancy? there was incredible financial stress because now we couldn't go out and do research. And I remember being very stressed and sharing this with my small groups. And you know, I was expecting empathy and a hug. They laughed. They laughed, and they told me that I am, you know, to open my eyes and see the resources that I have. So one woman told me, you might not have fully grown chicken, but you have chicks. Go trade. In fact, give me a chick, I will come and pick vegetables from my farm. And those are the solutions that were there. Because in my head, I was thinking, you have to have money. But I survived a lot on barter trade. And that is something I would never have thought of. I thought that's something that happened in the past generations. So these women taught me how to see. And it was incredibly humbling. And they've been a fantastic support, and they really changed my perspective, even in the other areas that I work in. So I'm very, very driven to work with these women, share with them, learn from them, and really we change lives, even on ground, because I know that even at their level, they have these incredible solutions that they're able to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and I did that deliberately for us to be able to bring out the idea and really begin to picture and imagine the nuances that the field has. When we're talking about amplifying voices from the field and beginning to delve into the innovations and the solutions that are being drawn from there, I really wanted to be able for us to appreciate the multi-passion, the multi-dimensional nature that drives the innovation, the people who are at the center of that innovation. So now I really want to switch to the topic, to the reason why we're here. And we are looking to lift innovative actions and solutions that are addressing food security, sustainable livelihoods for women in underserved communities, right? And looking at this particularly in the context of climate change. And Omagano, you began to speak about the work that you do at Maliasili. Do you mind talking about how these initiatives and the work that you are doing at Maliasili helps us to confront these multiple challenges of food insecurity, the livelihood challenges, and impacts of climate change?
Yeah, so I would like to premise that by saying that we work with over 50 local organizations in Africa that work in the conservation space. And again, conservation not excluding people, but putting people at the center of it. And I would like to share the story of one of our partners called the Pasteros Women's Council. They work in northern Tanzania, and they were founded in 1997 by 9 Maasai women. And their premise or their aim is to make sure that pastoral women, these are indigenous women, have access to better education, they have access to land, and that they have access to better livelihoods. And through their work, they've been able to provide microcredit to 2 villages, which is equivalent to around 13,000 women. And you can imagine the knock-on effects that that has in those communities. They've been able to collectively secure land for 2 pieces of land, and this is creating ownership. Women own this land in different villages in their communities. And again, you can imagine the knock-on effects that that has for the people, for the women in particularly, because their focus is on women, in enhancing their livelihood, in enhancing the well-being more generally, and also the well-being of the communities in which they work, the communities in which they serve. And these are local women that are doing the work. And I thought it's just important to highlight that, because there are real solutions that are happening on the ground, and we often don't hear about that. And so part of why I'm sitting here is to highlight that work. And we have many examples. This is one of 50 of our partners.
Amagana, do you mind just giving us a sense of where these women are in the countries where you operate? The focus of the fund is to provide funding to groups in Africa. Is that correct? But the continent is big, as we know.
Yeah. So the focus of the Maliasili Fund? Yeah. So we have a pooled funding. And part of the reason that we have this funding is to show good funding practices. And we fund in 3 key geographies. So in Kenya, in Southern Africa, and in Madagascar as well. And this money really goes to local organizations that are working on conservation, that are working with local communities in various villages in these different parts of the world, that are working with people that would otherwise not have access and be able to benefit really from the natural resources that they have been looking after for the longest time. I mean, we're basically here and have the planet that we have because of the local communities and the indigenous people that have been living and protecting our ecosystems and our land. So the fund really is in order to impact that, and also hoping that it creates a greater impact and that we're able to give money to local organizations working outside of these 3 geographies, because the need is great. And the need is not only in these 3 geographies.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
That's fine, it does, and I'll come back to you later for specific examples about maybe some success stories that inspire you and you are excited about. Harsh, you spoke in your introduction, you spoke about solar, you spoke about financial literacy education, and I'm sitting here and wondering, what's that got to do with climate? So would you kind to just share with us how the work that you are doing at Bindi Barefoot helping us to address the challenges of food insecurity, climate, or whatever lens you're using for the work that you do?
Absolutely, and thank you. So I would like to take an example over here. You can look at the lady carrying that solar panel. She is Laiku Lama. She is one of the solar trainers we trained in 2017-18 when our ex-CEO Megan, who's sitting there, it was one of the first projects we did in Nepal. So she comes from a community which is at the height of 5,000 meters, which is near Humla, which is the Tibet region of Nepal. And there, when winters come, there's hardly anything that can grow. And we went there because electricity was a challenge, and their only source of energy was firewood, which was also very limited when winters came into place. So when we went there, we started working on electrifying the whole village so that they have sustainable source of clean energy, and the firewood and the health hazard that was coming from it could be reduced. Because we always look at solar as a way of negating carbon, right? But solar has a cascading effect also, because clean energy or sustainable energy forms the bedrock of any economic development you would like to have. So in this example, one of the things was that during winters, they could only save grains. And in Nepal, they dig it inside and keep it under the ground so that during winters they could just use a bit of it. No vegetables, no fruits or anything like that. Whereas in seasons, in summer seasons, they have the most rarest herbs, apricots, apples, and all of these things. So that is when Laiku came to us and said that, let's work on this, and how can we dry these things, and how can we use solar as a technology or solar dryers to actually preserve these vegetables and fruits which could be used later during winters and hence enhancing the diversity of the food they used to have in winters. Now we started, so she came up with that suggestion. My products team started working on it. We came up with a solar dryer which could be easily dismantled, repaired, and could maintain the temperatures as per her liking, and also something that could be repaired. I didn't want to throw another product over there which could just break in mid of the time they need it, and then it's of no use. So then then she started using it, and now they have a small enterprise. It's not big, but anyone who visits Kathmandu, you should visit this shop which is called Karnali Direct. It is run by these women from Humla who are sending their products to Kathmandu, where they have a cousin who's the first female lawyer from that region who has started a shop in the main center of Nepal. So it's a clear, it's a very inspiring story, and one of the things why I keep doing what I do, and how solar is actually having effect on different aspects as well.
Thank you, Harsh. Shall we give him a round of applause? Thank you. What I really like about what you are highlighting, and Omagano did the same, is the ripple impact that the solutions have. And in this case, within the energy transition and transitioning to clean energy, and what you are highlighting for us is that at the end of the day, access to energy provides access to a whole lot of other goods and services for the communities that we work with. And that's a story that we don't get to hear often in global policy spaces. I'm going to switch to, I mean, we've heard from two organized groups, but the change makers in our communities are also individuals. And this is the power behind the two women who are farmers and a whole lot more. And I wanted to switch to Mams. Mams, you also have a very interesting stories to share about the work that you're doing in as Bee Africa and connecting beyond the bees. You actually were telling us about the connection of the bees to the ecosystem, to climate. Yeah. Would you be kind to share with the rest of the audience?
Oh, yes. So in 2012, South Africa experienced one of the worst atrocities post-democracy. And that is the Marikana massacre. And I'm assuming that most of you would be aware of what happened in 2012, because it was in the news, domestic and global. So I was bothered by that incident. And primarily, I was bothered because of the fact that then, in 2012, I was in the industry, in the poultry industry, however, in the egg-laying sector of the poultry industry. So I was supplying eggs, table eggs, to a whole lot of mines in Rustenburg, in Marikana, and the like. So I used to travel to Marikana quite frequently, and it felt like, I'm attached to Marikana, especially when that incident happened. So what I then did was, I felt I needed to talk to the widows of Marikana. It took me years before I got access to the widows. And so I was telling them about bees. I mean, the Marikana massacre happened since 2012. I met the Marikana widows in 2020. So anyway, in my conversation with them, I tell them about the bees, and I say to them, African honeybees have got the propensity to heal. And I'm here to introduce beekeeping as sustainable enterprises for you so that you can, you can have a good livelihood. So they got excited. However, they then said to me, we are going to ask you to speak to the mining house, which is now Sibanye Stillwater. So anyway, I said, can you facilitate that linkage? And indeed they did that. So I then I had a meeting with the Sibanye executive, the Sibanye Stillwater executives, and I presented my case to them, my business case to them, which business case speaks to establishing this sustainable beekeeping enterprises for these women, but importantly, bringing into the fore the whole issue of biodiversity restoration, you know, so and food security, because it is said, by the way, that 80% of the crops that we consume as human beings is pollinated by bees. So therefore, without bees, there is no food. And we've integrated the establishment of food gardens to our Be African business model, which means therefore that when we set up these enterprises, obviously we do an assessment of the environment, you know, because honey production and therefore for the bees to thrive, they depend on two things, on nectar and water. So what we then did was we encourage these women to establish this veggie patches, you know, the vegetable gardens, with the understanding and the knowledge that the bees will also collect nectar and pollen from these very same vegetables, which are edible by us as human beings. So that for me is a model that highlights, or that rather integrates food security, not only food security, but it also strengthens nutrition security to these beekeeping enterprises that we establish. And why am I talking about nutrition security? Because nutrition, honey in itself, is a nutritious product. So we have got this commercial beekeeping site. So the Sibanye Stillwater, they were very happy. They were quite wowed by that presentation. And they said, "Ma'ams, we will give you money for shared value so that you can create this commercial beekeeping site for these women." So that's one example that I'm citing. But the other example that I have is women in Vembe. So Vembe is Limpopo, up Limpopo. And this community resides within what is called the Vembe Biosphere Reserve. So I approached the University of Venda, which is also in Vembe. And I approached them after I had interacted with this community. The beauty about the Vembe beekeeping community is that it comprises of elderly women, you know, and as we know, our elders are the custodians of indigenous knowledge. So one of the discoveries and the most, I would say, the most significant discovery realization I had with them is that they are not scared of bees. So every time, Masiho, we speak about bees, I don't know about you, but most people, they think about, oh, the bees are going to sting me. So there is this bee phobia. It's pretty much integral in the beekeeping. But the elders, what I appreciated about the elders is that they've got a way of communicating with the bees such that the bees are always calm when they work with them. So what I then did was, okay, let's bring the youth and do a pairing of the elders and the youth so that we can deconstruct our mindset from bee phobia.
Thank
so
you.
That's
Thank you, ma'ams. Hold that thought, because I know where you're going with it. It's the strategic partnerships that you keep, that you shared earlier. And when we wrap up, I'd like you to come back to it so that you can share with us what kind of collaboration you'd like to see so that you're able to scale this work, working with the women, the elders, and the young people. Rose, just to turn to you to share your initiatives.
Okay. I think maybe I'd like to start about how my various experiences intersect, and some of the initiatives that are there are to address some of the stress that is brought on by the stress we've had in climate change. And to give my personal experience, I mean, over the years, I've been in farming for over 20 years, and over the years, the yield has changed. We cannot tell when to plant, and right now it's an incredible stress for women and for farmers generally. So the last 2 seasons, if they're an example, the rains came late, so we all planted late, so the yield was affected. The next season, the rain was too much, so a lot of people lost. Again, the yield was affected. And for smaller farmers, I would consider myself maybe just low to medium. But for smaller farmers, when they get, yes, they will supplement their food budget, but half the time, the harvest usually coincides with going back to school. So they sell all their harvest to be able to pay school fees. So what has happened, the last cold season has extended. We usually have 2 months of cold season. Now we've had from April all the way to September. So the ground is hard and there's no water. What has that done to the food budget for a lot of women is that now they have to buy water, and what they were supplementing, because the seasons were closer in their food budget has increased. So there's incredible stress, mental stress, and that is where because I'm a trained counseling psychologist, so I offer counseling services on ground. I also do mental health sensitization, especially with stakeholders. My last initiatives have been aimed at stakeholders, the chiefs, the police, the imams, the church leaders, the senator's office, the governor's office, and getting them, to understand the incredible stresses that are on ground and what mental health is and what it isn't. The other one is, when I talk to these women and I ask them, what do you need? And what are some of the effects? Other than increased stress, which leads to some violence at home, they tell me, okay, so now that we have a higher food budget, and they earn about maybe $1, $2 a day, one of the things that I can't afford is sanitary towels. So somebody would not have thought of that. But they ask me, at the end of the day, will I buy food for my kids or will I buy sanitary towels? Unfortunately, during this time, I think with the Financial Act being scrapped off, some of the casualties, the government used to provide sanitary towels to school-going and secondary school children. But that was scrapped when the financial budget was axed. And before, these women would actually wait for their children to get packets from school and then share with them. So that has been an added, that has been cut off. So what are women doing? They pick their wrappers, cut it into pieces, and use the cloth and rewash. So one of the initiatives that I did is I rounded up resources, and we sort of give like 1 or 2 cartons per women's group every month, just as we figure out a more, regular solution to such issues. I know I was listening to my co-speaker here talking about giving financial solutions. And what has happened is women are using the village and savings, because these groups, they are beyond psychosocial, so they inevitably have a table banking element. And so the women now, the solution they have is to borrow from one, pay to the other, then borrow from the other one, pay to the other, as they figure out more sustainable solution. And that has created a bit of stress in that, at some point the loop catches up with you. So, but it's not all doom and gloom, because one, there's more, perceptions are shifting, and I think that is where the hope lies, in that women now are beginning to question and to listen to and look for information. And there's perceptions that are changing, that vegetables are healthier, and it's something that I can be able to sell and get some bit of surplus. Another interesting thing that happened is there's a time the government started pushing the domestic tourism agenda. And it's interesting just the way some of these things intersect. So how that made a difference for my area was suddenly people from Nairobi, the capital city, were going to the coast for a holiday. Now, one of the main things that is served for breakfast is something called mbaazi, pigeon peas. So suddenly, people in Nairobi became aware there's something called pigeon peas, which drove demand. And that is one of the main crops that we grow as a region. So then we had now a new expanded market to be able to sell pigeon peas, which are very resilient to drought, and they're great for the soil.
Thank you, and thank you for connecting back to why. Why the pigeon, the pigeon peas, and how they help build resilience of our agricultural systems. We are getting to the wrap up, and I did say I'll come back to you with a story of inspiration, and I'd like to tie that story to collaboration, where you see opportunities for collaboration across working with NGOs, working with private sector, with governments, with the philanthropy sector. What kind of resources and support do you need to be able to scale some of the successful efforts that you run as Maliasili? And I will.
Thanks, Masejo. I just want to say that, Rose, your story resonates quite deeply. And maybe we should think about pigeon peas in Namibia, because if they're drought resistant, they might work. So the type of initiatives, and I want to say that the collaboration is taking place. And I want to give an example of an area in Southern Africa. It's called the Kavangwa Zambezi, Kaza for short. It is a 520,000 square kilometers, and it encompasses 5 countries, 5 neighboring countries. It's a very important area, for example, elephant migration. It's a place where the highest density of elephants exist. And in that area, people live alongside wildlife. So you can imagine the amount of human-wildlife conflict that happens there. The NGOs in this area are working together, the local NGOs, but it's very fragmented how they work together. So some work together here, others here, but that's not, the collective still needs some work. And I think it's in there where we can enhance collaboration by creating spaces for them to convene, by giving them the resources to convene themselves, because they can also do it. We don't always have to do it for them. And one other thing I think is important, and it has been touched on, and I'll be quick, is around funding. I think there's a great recognition in this room that funding is important. And I want to take it a step further. There's funding, and then there's good funding. A lot of the funding that goes to the local organizations, and no, the area is not saturated with funding because it stays with the international organizations. It doesn't trickle down. And we heard some statistics today. Good funding is funding that is long-term, it is trust-based, it is not complicated. People have better things to do than working on papers, right? Like, there are more important things to do. And I really want to encourage everyone in this room to challenge the funding practices. We have the means, we have the resources, we have the voices, and we have the numbers to challenge those funding practices. So always take it a step further and say, this money, can it be good funding? Because that's what we are advocating for. And there are enough examples to show that good funding is possible, and it exists, and it has a much greater impact than the traditional funding that we know.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Harsh?
So I'll reiterate, good funding is one of the most important things, and also funding with some sort of a long sight in mind, because nothing happens overnight. These are big challenges. It will take time, so funding with patience is something I will just add to that. Another thing that I feel my call to action is that apart from funding, because we work on solar, I want people to work, public, private, and NGOs to work together to democratize technology. Now, everyone understands how important renewable clean energy everything is, whereas in global south and in rural areas, we are still moving towards getting them to traditional power and then moving into clean energy, whereas half of the metros and cities are going into renewable. So instead of reinventing the wheel, why don't we work towards reducing the cost of the technology, investing more on research so that these areas can actually leapfrog into the era of clean energy instead of following the path that everyone has already gone through. So that is one of the things that I feel is very essential, and everyone should think about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Just as an example, just to set a context, in India, it's by 2030, the renewable business is supposed to be 50 billion. My vision is that this time, at least not 1/10 of 1% what someone was talking about, at least half of that 50 billion, because 70% stays in rural area, should go into rural and should go into clean energy reaching there.
Thank you. The importance of decentralized renewable energy, I think that is really key. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. It's the passion. I'm going to switch things around and come to Rose first, and then Mems. What are the solutions that for you are scalable and could make the work that you're doing a lot more sustainable and impactful?
One of the biggest challenges, just me personally, is just information on when to do what. And what I mean by that is we get weather alerts, it will rain, but we need more substantial information about when to plant, what to plant, and and what practices can be put on ground. We do have an agricultural extension system, but they are far, and in between they'll come like twice a year. And like the last time they promised us seed, they came to each women's group and gave one woman 1 kilo of seed, and each group has like 20 women. So right now we have a huge stress on seed, and I was told that somebody here works on seed banks, I think, and it would be great to get ideas on how we can cascade that and find more sustainable ways of addressing this problem. The other issue is water. Water is a big, big challenge for us, and we are currently brainstorming on how to do water pans, to be able to at least collect runoff when it's raining and be able to get through a season. The solution right now has been, there's a lot of people who've come up with boreholes, and women have to buy. And so, but in as much as it may not be much, but they use that to also sustain their vegetable gardens, as well as drink and for household duties. So it's an incredible stress. But at least it is managing to do the vegetable gardens, which are able to then, of course, hit the issue of increasing nutrition, as well as some surplus for being able to sell in the market. The other strategy that has worked for me is diversification. For the longest time, I was a maize and beans farmer, but because of having to think out of the box, I ended up doing tree farming, and I do both indigenous and fruit farming, where I do mango, bananas, pawpaw. Yes, I think mango, tangerines and oranges and lemons. And I also do a lot of indigenous trees. I have some baobab, some mahogany, and some other varieties. I also plant vegetables because I was sharing this experience. We also run a student's hostel, And when it's market day, and ours is one of the larger markets, vegetables run out. So I started supplementing inside a vegetable garden, and some of it I would also sell in the community or share. Like the example I had given, I could be able to barter trade for it. And for my workers, they would just pick and use it. So we do kale, spinach, onions, passion fruit, coriander, and onions, and a couple of other vegetables. I also do contract farming for chili. So I put in an irrigation system on one of the shambas and I was very interested in the drying, because when I needed to dry, because it has more commercial value, there was none in the area, and it was frustrating. And you have to go very far to get a drying facility. I also have macadamia trees, harvest macadamia, and I think and diversification, chicken, goats, and livestock, and that has really made a big difference. Some of the others were, there was an initiative that was introduced which gave us some cook stoves that made a difference, because then the reliance on firewood went down. Because as much as I will cook with gas, it's very expensive in my house. So we do end up using firewood from especially dead trees on the farm. But this particular jiko, and it was built in all our kitchens, uses only 2 pieces of firewood, and it has made a big, big difference. So those are some of the things that, when I learn about such initiatives, I cascade and make sure that this is happening to the other women's groups. We also had a kickstart pump that you could be able to pump water from the river. Unfortunately, the river has dried out. And that was another thing that I was able to introduce into the community. The government also dammed our river upriver, so our river dried out. So you only get overflow when there's heavy rain, but we're in conversation of trying to redirect that into our farm so that we can be able to do more farming, especially vegetable farming.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose. MEMS, collaboration, scalable solutions.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Okay, thank you. So before I get to that, I just appreciate the scenario that has been painted by both Omagano and Rose. And Rose, I really think there is an instant opportunity for collaboration, and I'll tell you why. Elephants are scared of bees. So we've often heard, that's a fact. Elephants, those humongous animals are scared of this tiniest insect. So we've heard a lot about people-elephant conflict. So there's a concept of bee fence. So what you do is you place your beehives, your colonized beehives, along the perimeter of the area where your population, a greater population of elephants would be. I tell you what, that resolves people-elephant conflict almost instantly. So yeah, so let's have a chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, but thank you. But Rose, I also appreciate the kinds of plants that you are cultivating, macadamia, citrus. By the way, those are also pollinated by bees. And what happens is that your yield of the harvest increases by at least 30%. So please do consider setting up hosting some beehives on your land. And Masok, I think you were right when you said we should all keep bees.
Oh.
And Bee African is here to help you navigate that journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, coming back to your question, yeah?
Actually, I think you answered my question beautifully. I'll tell you why.
All right. Okay.
And I'm sorry. I mean, we obviously needed a lot of time. I think we are. Yeah. We started a little bit late, but we are at time. I'll tell you, you did answer that beautifully. I really like that because it did a number of things. It demonstrated that conversation and that exchange right there was intersectionality in practice. And what it also did was to demonstrate to us what scalable looks like, right? Sometimes it's not just about replicating initiatives, but it's also about scaling and sharing ideas. And we just saw that in practice. What I also love about this panel was to really show us that when we actually talk about building resilience to climate change and mitigation responses, it is not just single issues, single bullets, that it is multidimensional, and that particularly when we're looking at supporting livelihoods, we really have to think about diversification. It touches on all aspects. We've heard about the farming systems. We've heard about the importance of nature-based solutions that are not just looking at protecting nature, but looking at unlocking income and creating wealth for the communities, the beekeepers, MAMs, the regenerative agricultural practices that Rose shared with us. And we also have that the biggest innovation is perhaps having a rethink about how we fund and who we fund, that resource flow. And most importantly, decentralizing technology and getting it to the ground, decentralizing the capacity to manage the technology, to repair it, to own it, and to distribute it further. Absolutely. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. You can see I was having a good time. We could have been here for another 2 hours.